On now to our next big focus. If it is passed in Parliament, the new Marriage Laws Amendment Bill will go a long way, it is hoped, in giving women the security they deserve after the failure of their marriages. Now, women who are granted a divorce can claim a portion of the property of their husband, including property that's been inherited. A judge, however, will decide how this actual division will take place. Now, there have been mixed reactions to the bill. Some say it is a landmark step, others say it cannot be implemented. And there are those who believe that men will end up being victims of unsuccessful marriages.
Should a woman get a share in her former husband's inherited property after divorce? On Wednesday evening, the Union Cabinet, while approving the Marriage Laws Amendment Bill, said yes. But importantly, the government says it's for the courts to decide what should be the wife's share in her husband's property. That's a come down from its earlier draft that said a woman should have equal share in her ex-husband's property, acquired post-marriage or inherited. Opinions seem divided on the new provision. Left parties say the new law should clearly state a woman should have equal rights in her husband's property, acquired post-marriage. The left welcomed the move of giving divorced women a share in ancestral property of their ex-husbands.
How to ensure rights of women, particularly on property of parents, property of husbands.
Some people say that what if the law is open to misuse? Somebody gets married only for ancestral property and then the marriage breaks down. What happens then?
That is why I said all aspects will have to be carefully studied, examined.
Congress too avoided a direct answer.
Let it come to the party and the platform of the parliament. Things will be discussed.
Some in the legal fraternity also have serious reservations over the amendments.
In the Western world, where by and large a house is owned by one person, easy to divide, but not where it is owned by several people or owned by a Hindu undivided family.
But the proposed changes in the marriage law can bring some respite to people like Naomi Chawla Chandan, who now lives with her father in Pune.
This 32-year-old who has an 8-year-old child has been fighting a bitter battle for the past 5 years to end her marriage. Right now, a couple needs to agree jointly before a court of law to end their marriage, and that too after a mandatory waiting period of 6 to 18 months. Now the law says either side can file for divorce within 3 years if a couple cannot reconcile their differences.
There's something that has to be done about, like, put a stop to these people who are literally not taking the law seriously.
What's clear is that the new provisions of the marriage law will have far-reaching consequences, and that's why many of the political parties want to firm up their stand while debating these provisions in Parliament. With Imtiaz Zalil in Pune, this is Sandeep Phukan reporting for NDTV.
Well, is this a big step forward for the rights of women who are in marriages which are just not tenable, or is it perhaps going a step too far? Are men in the process being victimized because there are certain people who feel that that may also be the case? Or has this bill actually not done enough? Should more have been done to protect the rights of women who are in failed marriages? Joining us to discuss this, Jaya Jaitley, thanks very much for being with us. Khushbu, the actress and DMK leader, Malavika Rajkotia, advocate, and Ajit Rajpara, president of the Men's Rights Association. Thank you all very much for joining us. Jaya Jaitley, for those who are trapped in potentially abusive marriages and who choose to walk out, they do not have access to their stridhan, they do not have access to any wealth or any possessions which may have been within the confines of that marriage. Isn't this a huge step? Because ultimately a woman who seeks a divorce can say that I want a part of this property. That's all I can get. I can't get anything else. So isn't that a big step forward?
It is, but there are many factors which are still question marks in this. For instance, if a woman doesn't have anything at all, would she in the normal course be married to a person who has a lot? Let's look at our society. People who are more or less equal when families arrange the marriages, the woman would not completely be unequal. Of course, she would have no property of her own, But for that, I still feel that we should have more laws which enable women to be empowered before they go into a marriage. If in a marriage they feel it's untenable, of course they must be able to walk out more easily than now. They should not be helpless without any money. But I still feel that bringing in inherited ancestral property is complicating things. You should have perhaps a prenup arrangement as a legal entity before all this, and make sure that the woman has enough alimony and all those sort of provisions, rather than looking at his whatever property. Because as you said, and I agree with you, there are a lot of greedy people today who are pushing their daughters into marriage, thinking that they can get something out of it by the marriage failing in a few months' time.
But the large number of women in this country who have suffered in a marriage remain helplessly within the confines of a marriage, because they realize that if they choose to exit, they may not get the financial security that they seek.
True, but mostly I would say the same women that we're talking about are married to men who don't really have much to give. So we have to, sometimes those kind of men and women as a family have to look after their parents as well. We'd have to talk about societies as they exist today and not in theory.
Malvika, do you agree with that?
It's too complex to agree and disagree so easily, but
it's difficult to implement. That was actually going to be my question.
Yeah. Well, let me just quickly tell you what was. What was is that you could ask for divorce based on what is called the fault theory. You had to allege X, Y, Z, and the defense often of the person resisting the divorce used to be, I am not at fault and you cannot get the divorce because you cannot take advantage of your fault.
Right.
That is your main divorce. Most of the time used to go past 10 years could go in trying to foist fault upon the other because of court delays and trials taking that long. But most important, these things used to get delayed because of what was called an ancillary or an interim relief in the process of the trial. So the interim relief would be primarily maintenance. When originally it came in 56, it was gender neutral. So any disempowered spouse financially could ask the other for money.
Yes.
But as it happens, social realities, it's mostly the women. She would say, if I have to contest this case, make arrangements for me immediately with regard to getting me some money immediately.
Right.
That was the spirit of the law.
Yes.
In fact, sometimes even to get an interim relief, 2-3 years can go by.
Right.
The other ancillary relief is custody.
Yes.
What is the parenting plan?
Yes.
Today, now in the process of all of this, the trial used to get lost. Litigation exhaustion used to set in. Regardless of rights, people were exhausted, and sometimes when the divorce came, it was meaningless to both.
Yes.
Or was denied, it was meaningless to both. Therefore, today what will happen is irretrievable comes in, where one party says, I cannot.
Right.
Then the court can come to a conclusion whether this is genuine or not, but at least we've dealt with the major trial.
Yes.
Then straight away parties can move on, and we are dealing with the only two ancillary reliefs which are of importance in a dead relationship, which is money and which is children.
Right.
Now, when it comes to money, traditionally too, as far as alimony was concerned, it was always a factor. Ancestral property, lifestyle, etc. was a factor that could be taken into consideration by a court when they awarded alimony.
Yes.